Welcome to River of Ideas, the podcast about greener cities and cleaner water. I'm Abby Moore, the outreach manager here at the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, and I'm here today talking with Victoria Bradford Styrbicki. Victoria currently has an exhibition in our gallery at Stormwater Park and Learning Center called Network, A River Connected, which is a collection of handmade fishing nets as well as photos, video, and stories collected during Victoria's journey along the entire Mississippi River in 2019. I'm excited to interview Victoria today and hear more about her background, her journey along and connection to the Mississippi River and her artwork. So Victoria, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks.
I like to start these podcasts by asking people what their favorite place is along the river. Do you have a favorite spot?
Boy, that's tough. Probably have several favorite spots. I'm a little biased, being that my home place is in Louisiana, and so kind of the marshy, watery landscape down in Plaquemines Parish. When I reached that place, really appealed to me. Running along the levees, seeing the ships pass. And when we got taken out into the marsh and seeing some of the restoration projects, where land is being formed, was really incredible and moving. And it kind of resonated to me with a story we heard at the top of the river, which was Sally Fineday from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe telling me their origin story and the three animals going down to the bottom of the lake to form land at the top, and that became Turtle Island. And it was like, that's what they're doing down in Louisiana. They're going down to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico and placing land on top to form, new land. And it's just with heavy machinery. So it's there's things at the top of the river and the bottom of the river that are really resonant to me. And those are my two homes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's cool because I just think about, I'm super familiar with this section and some of the river as it goes through the Midwest, but down beyond St. Louis, I have no experience with it. So I've seen pictures and video, of course, but I can't even quite imagine what it's like as it gets bigger and bigger and empties into the Gulf and, just kind of spreads out and creates a whole different ecosystem than what we know here.
Yeah, I think, it gets tamed with the levee system below St. Louis. But then when, like I said, when you get back down to Plaquemines, the levee falls away on the east bank, and it begins to be that wild river again, somewhat like you have in Minnesota in the Headwaters region where it is really wild. And again, you have that, that symbiosis to me in the top and the bottom. And there's that relationship of what the river used to be and how it can flow.
Yeah. Well, neat. I said sort of at the beginning that you had traveled the entire length of the Mississippi River in 2019, and you did that on foot and on bike. Is that correct?
On foot and on bike.
Okay.
So we traveled 20 to 40 miles each day. Some days were like 50 miles. So those longer days, we mixed in some cycling because it was just two of us doing relay style. So one of us would drive the van ahead and the other would travel on foot, and then we would swap places. So going 50 miles in a day was just a little too far for our little feet to take us. So the bikes were handy. And then some of the roads were just really not suited to be on foot. It was unsafe. So again, having bikes to kind of help us out in those situations, it wasn't meant to be this epic athletic feat. It was really meant to be an experience where we could gather the landscape and experience it kind of slowed down. The river is slow. If you travel it by barge, it moves slowly. We wanted to encounter the landscape at the pedestrian scale and really kind of be able to hear it like we were going to hear the voices of the people in the communities.
So one of the things that I think I understood when I looked at the story map that you have that kind of documents your whole journey online was that you were attempting to kind of travel at the same speed that the water flows. Is that some of sort of the inspiration for that?
Definitely. So I'm a dance artist, a choreographer. And part of the inspiration for, actually running the river or moving in the human body down the river was that it was a dance, that running was a dance, that movement through a landscape was a dance, and that when you embody a space and a landscape, you can kind of respond to it. And we couldn't necessarily have the same experience on a kayak, or on a canoe, to understand how the water was connected to the communities, the landscape, farms, industry, all of the roads and the bridges. We got to encounter those things, and it was really about how communities shape the river and the river shaped the communities and the individuals there. So by being enmeshed in that landscape, we got to feel that. And like you're saying, moving at the speed of the river, at the rate of the current, kind of embodying that as a, symbolic dance, was really a big part of that inspiration.
So, as far as kind of the idea for the whole thing, so thinking about we're going to travel the whole river on foot and on bike, we're going to stop in, what was that, 104 different communities along the way and talk with people and get to know them and their connection with the river. And so I definitely hear this sort of idea of the movement piece and the connection piece sort of physically. Was there, as you were envisioning kind of this project as a whole, what was it about sort of the place and the river? Like, what was the whole package that you were kind of looking for?
Well, I mean, the original idea, really came from a place of disconnect from my home place of Louisiana. Like, I grew up there, and I really didn't, have a strong connection to the Mississippi River there, other than a place to cross over, when we went to visit family, or the Gulf of Mexico. We spent a lot of time on the one barrier island that's occupied. And my mom's family is from an area that was part of a distributary of the Mississippi River at one point. And so, I had these kind of loose connections to the river, but also I had kind of run away from home. And I, recognizing all of the problems that Louisiana is facing, whether it's climate and subsidence and rising sea levels and poverty and all the things, I realized that after 10 years of, kind of growth and development in Chicago, that I needed to reconnect. And I thought, I can't just jump right back into my home and say, oh, I can come fix your lives and I have all the solutions. I needed to understand that place in a more, substantial way. And so I needed to go on a pilgrimage. That's just what I thought. And the most logical thing to me was to travel the river that shapes that state. It forms the boot itself. And so to pilgrimage, you usually travel on foot. And so it just made sense that I was going to do that. And it took a long time. It took years to figure out exactly where we were going to stop, who was going to travel with me, how it evolved to be much more about the individual communities and the people who live there than about my own journey and a personal, exploration of self. It really landed in a place where it was much more about those people and their relationship to the river and the river itself than about my journey home. But that's how art evolves, and it's an exploration, and I really trust in the process to lead me. And so, I had a lot of support, a lot of people who believed in this project, and it was a crazy idea. It was a big idea, and it just kind of unfolded.
Mm-hmm. So you had in advance arranged, I assumed, to stop in each of these places that you stopped and connect with people there.
Yes. So a year before the project, I had already identified 100 communities that were potential, this kind of reasonable distance apart, 20 to 40 miles. And I had reached out to them with a kind of cold call campaign, sending letters, making calls, emails. and set up appointments to meet with them in person with a kind of constituency group that represented, maybe it was an arts council, a chamber of commerce, a tourism, a church group, a science center, stakeholders who represented the community. And so my mother and I drove the river in 30 days. And this was in 2018. And we met maybe 4 to 6 communities a day. So it was, 30-minute meeting, an hour-long meeting, depending upon the size of the group we were meeting with, and just traveled. And this really created the relationships, and the communities became collaborators. And I asked them, what role can I serve in your community? It's not just that I have this big idea and you need me. No, maybe you don't need me. Maybe this isn't going to work. It's really, I have this idea, but does it work for you? And is it relevant to you? And, how can we work together? And so over the next year, together with those groups, we planned, they helped me find the 6 people in their community that I would interview and interact with. They helped plan community events, storytelling events. They provided lodging and a meal for us. So it was really contingent on these communities buying into this idea and helping shape this idea, what it would become.
That's really cool. I'm curious about, as you traveled down the river and you talked with all these people and kind of connected in these different communities, if there were like big commonalities sort of among the way people related to the river or the way that they interacted with you and your project.
I think, I was so surprised at generosity of people. This was a time of kind of political divisiveness in our country. Really like red state, blue state, we're staking our claim and who we are. And not that we haven't continued to be in that kind of state of mind, but it was really heightened in 2019. And no one brought up politics. It was just about, sharing of self, sharing of community, welcoming us into their homes. This was right before COVID. And so I just can't imagine that we could have even had this experience the next year. And so what a great, opportunity that it happened when it happened. People loved the river. Even in places where they were separated from the river, where, the levee was there was some kind of relationship with the river. And river towns, are on decline. That was a reality. It wasn't all like roses and sunflowers and, there is a reality of struggle, whether it's poverty, drugs, things that these communities are, a loss of manufacturing, things like that these communities are grappling with and looking for tourism as a, solution. And some of that's working in some places better than in other places, and we definitely saw that. But we heard and we were listening for those real, human stories. And I think people shared more of themselves than maybe they expected to. And that's, that was meaningful to us. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear much about concerns about environmental degradation or water quality?
We definitely heard, concerns about water quality, people's concerns like in the lower river about plastic pollution in the river, or concerns about industrial pollution, the dead zone, farmers in even a small farmer in Iowa who was concerned and very thoughtful about how he used his land to protect against, not putting, harmful fertilizer chemicals into the river. There were different sections of the upper river where people felt like their water was so clean. And it wasn't always we're in the headwaters, everybody kind of maybe thinks that the water is the cleanest. But further downriver, people thought their water was the cleanest, which was, surprising. And it's so kind of listening to people's relationship to what is deemed clean water, or how the river is taken care of, or their relationship to the fisheries in their community. And there was a lot of sporting that happened in the upper river, a lot of relationship to the river as a sporting place. Then that decreased a lot in the lower river. There's not as much access. And that's just, by virtue of the way the river is structured and levied, in the lower river. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there were people taking care of the river for ecological reasons, but it wasn't that people were necessarily, we didn't necessarily interview a bunch of environmentalists. We did talk with some people from conservation organizations, and groups who managed like pools, who were part of volunteer organizations that picked up trash and, things. They were very proud of the work that they had did for communities and for the river, those kind of things.
Yeah, that's neat. I was going to ask if people were feeling like they were part of the effort to manage the water quality. So it sounds like absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was, definitely in the upper river. I would say we met a lot of people who were doing those kind of volunteer efforts to manage the water quality. And, in the lower river, I think people are not right next to the river. And they're either separated by farm, levee, they're further away, and they're not as connected to how they impact the river. And so their relationship to the river is history. And so you hear a lot of stories of the river about the Civil War, about before the Civil War, about the river, Mark Twain, the historied version of the river. And that is their deep connection to it, instead of a present day connection to actually interacting with the river as a body of water.
Yeah. Is there a particular person or group or place that stands out to you from your experience, like something that really made an impact on you as far as a story or I'm sure there's lots, but
There's lots.
Something that stands out that you want to share?
So in West Memphis, so West Memphis is a community. It's right across the river from Memphis. It's primarily African American community. It's one of the communities, much like East St. Louis, right across from St. Louis, that we were told by various people, don't go. You don't need to go there. And it's known, for high crime, and other kinds of statistics. And when I went on the advanced tour, the 30-day tour with my mom, I met with a group about 14 or so stakeholders, and they were all very supportive. It was mostly white people and one African American man, and they were all very supportive and interested. And as I was leaving, the African American man, his name was Fred Leonard, he came up to me and he said, "If you need anything, let me know." Okay, so then when we're scheduling, we're finally getting down to planning the trip. It turns out we're going to be there on a Sunday. And all the people in that room, they said, "Oh, no, Sunday, that's a bad day. That's church. We can't do anything with you on a Sunday." But Fred Leonard said, "Well, come to church with me. That's great. I'll introduce you to the pastor and to Mr. Salone Anthony, who, he's a really, community member, and we'll have a great time." And so Old St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, 2.5-hour service, it was amazing. I mean, they welcomed us in. We spent the whole day with Fred. We met the pastor, and he told us about why he was in West Memphis, because he's not from there. And he originally was traveling, from his home in Arkansas to another place and would get off the highway with his granddaughter in the back, and they would just kind of drive through West Memphis just to see what it was about. And she would ask him, well, are we moving here? And he was like, oh, I don't know, maybe. And, he just knew it was a neglected place. And he said, God told me to come here, and there's good I could do here. And he's trying to build up the Black leadership community there. And it was just a moving story. I mean, I get emotional about it now because, he not only, he welcomed us, he made it possible for us to be there, and he was just doing such good things in that community.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great story. And is there a picture?
There is a picture
downstairs?
of Fred
Okay.
downstairs, yeah. And I think, it's not necessarily that he was connected to the river specifically, but I think there's something about the river and the fact that the river has shaped that community and Memphis and that community into what they are because of what's happened with the river over time. And then that's the reason that he's there. And there's a connection. The river isn't just about, our ecology. It's also about, our well-being, and water is just kind of a powerful emotional force as well, and it connects us.
Yeah. I think it's really important to recognize that on lots of levels, and that, I think about here, the Mississippi River runs right through Minneapolis and separates Minneapolis and St. Paul in lots of places, and is a significant geographical feature, but not everybody pays attention to it. Like you were mentioning before, you drive across it, and that's about the extent of your conscious relationship with it. But it is such a significant reason that these cities exist here, and has played a really significant role in the formation of the cities. And so, really important to recognize that. So your entire journey is documented through a story map. Relay of Voices is the name of the project. And we will put the link to the website in our notes for the podcast. And people can also find you on our website. So anyway, I really encourage people to check that out. It's a really great way to kind of dive in and see more deeply photos and video and accounts from these places and all the people that you connected with, and kind of get a sense for some of the big picture stuff. So I'm curious about the nets part of all of this. So in our exhibit downstairs, in addition to photos and video of the journey along the river, you also have a display of different handmade fishing nets. So what is the connection for you to the fishing nets, and how does that kind of fit in?
So, after writing and processing all of these stories from the river, I started, finally diving into that story of home of Louisiana, and interviewing my oldest aunt, and she was really close to my grandfather, who I never met. He died when my mom was 7, and he was a fisherman and a trapper. And she told a story about him weaving his fishing net attached to his big toe. He was trawling, is how she described it, making his trawl net for shrimping. And it was just such a fascinating and colorful description, and it made me inspired me to re-perform that act, to learn. One of my cousins actually still sews his own nets from scratch, and he taught me how to do this art, and I began doing it as I was as a way to kind of process some of the complicated stories I was beginning to uncover as I dove into my family narrative, and also the rich and deep history of water rights and conservation and industry down in Louisiana that really ties into, as a kind of a footnote, to the Mississippi River story and what has happened since we've levied the river, and stopped building up land along the coast of Louisiana, and had all of this subsidence, and invited industry in, and kind of reshaped our way of life as well as the landscape. And so that's kind of where I've been journeying in my work most recently, in this new investigation and making these nets. And it seemed like such a wonderful tie-in with the river, because it is a network of stories. And yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, they're really beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's an ongoing practice, ever evolving of making nets through the weaving practice, crocheting and macrame, inviting others to learn and passing on this practice that is to some extent disappearing, even in Louisiana and the other coastal places where it's done.
Yeah, great. Well, so your exhibit is up here through January 10th, so people can come see that. We are open, our gallery is open Monday through Thursday, 9 to 3. And then that will be coming down after that. But what's next for you?
Well, like I mentioned, I'm working on this kind of coastal listening project in Louisiana. So I have an exhibition there in May to August of 2025 in collaboration with some artisans here from Minnesota, as well as some artists down in Louisiana. I'm also working with the Browns Creek Watershed District. I live in Stillwater, and so after working here with MWMO, it made me think, well, oh gosh, there's watershed districts all over the place. There's one near me, or there's several. And so I reached out to Browns Creek, and we're putting together a short exhibition in my space in Stillwater, collaborating with some regional artists to respond to stories of the unique species of organisms in the watershed, and also displaying some information designs from the Washington County Conservation District about water quality issues like chlorides and sediment and things like that. And we're going to do a water bar a la Shania Madison, and try to bring attention to our water issues. So that's going to launch January 24th and run for 3 months in my space in Stillwater. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to check that out.
Yeah,
That
I hope
sounds
you'll
really
make
fun.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for being here today and sharing some of your story. And I encourage folks to come check out your exhibit while it's still up here through January 10th. And then, other than that, look you up to find out more about your exhibit in your space, and other things that you're up to. So,
Sounds good.
thanks
Thanks.
so much.
Yeah.